The Demon in the Attic. When we moved into the old Victorian house on Ashbury Lane, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. The house was large, charmingly vintage, and surrounded by towering oak trees that shielded it from the road. It was everything we'd hoped for, a place where my wife, Claire, our 7-year-old daughter, Lily, and I could settle down and make memories. But from the moment we stepped inside, the air seemed wrong. The house had an attic, a vast, dimly lit space accessed by a creaky pull-down ladder. Claire joked about how she'd finally have a place to store all her old books, and Lily's eyes lit up at the thought of playing adventure games up there. But something about the attic gave me pause. The realtor had brushed off the scuffed floorboards and the dark stains on the wooden beams as nothing more than old house quirks. Yet, when I stood beneath the open hatch, staring into the shadows that swallowed the top of the ladder, I felt an icy chill that seemed to radiate from above. The first few weeks passed uneventfully. We unpacked, painted rooms, and settled into our routines. But small, strange things began to happen. Lily would complain about the scratching noises she heard at night. At first, I dismissed it as mice or squirrels, but setting traps yielded nothing. Claire swore she'd hear footsteps above us when we were all downstairs, and objects around the house started to go missing only to reappear in odd places. One night, Lily came into our room crying. "There's a man in the attic," she whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly. I sat up, my stomach tightening. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What kind of man?" She shrugged, her little face pale. "I don't know. He's tall and dark. He doesn't talk, but he watches me. I see him when I'm in bed." Despite my attempts to reassure her, her words gnawed at me. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the creaky ladder into the attic. Dust hung thick in the air, illuminated by the beam of light. Boxes of old furniture and forgotten knickknacks lined the walls, but there was no sign of anyone or anything. I told myself it was just her imagination, but that night I dreamed of the attic. In my dream, a pair of glowing red eyes watched me from the corner, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. When I woke, my heart was pounding, and the faint sound of scratching seemed to echo from above. Over the following weeks, the activity in the house grew worse. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate. We'd hear heavy footsteps pacing back and forth above us, but whenever I checked the attic, it was empty. Lily became increasingly withdrawn, her cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber silence. One night, I found her sitting at the base of the attic ladder, staring up into the darkness. "Lily," I called gently, but she didn't respond. I approached her slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide and glassy. "He says he's coming," she whispered. "Who says that?" I asked, dread creeping into my voice. "The man in the attic. He says he wants to come down." Claire and I agreed it was time to call for help. A friend recommended a local paranormal investigator named Grant, who arrived a few days later with a small team and a plethora of equipment. Grant was a no-nonsense man in his 50s, with years of experience dealing with unexplained phenomena. As he set up motion sensors, cameras, and EVP recorders, he assured us that most cases turned out to have rational explanations. But as he climbed the ladder to the attic, his confident demeanor faltered. "It's colder up here," he muttered, his breath visible in the air despite the warm summer night. When he returned, his face was pale. "We'll run the equipment overnight and see what we find," he said. That night, Claire and I slept uneasily. At 3:15 a.m., we were jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream. It was coming from Lily's room. We burst through her door to find her sitting upright in bed, her face twisted in terror. "He's here," she shrieked. "He's in my room." The room was freezing, and the air felt heavy, oppressive. I gathered Lily in my arms as Grant and his team rushed in with their equipment. The motion sensors in the attic were blaring, and one of the cameras had captured a shadowy figure moving erratically across the room. The team decided to conduct a seance the following night to communicate with whatever entity was in the attic. As we sat in a circle beneath the hatch, the room grew colder, and the candles flickered violently. "Who are you?" Grant asked, his voice steady. "Why are you here?" The planchette on the Ouija board began to move. "Diamond." My heart sank. "What do you want?" Grant pressed. The planchette moved again. "Ly." A guttural growl filled the room, and the attic hatch slammed shut with a deafening bang. The seance ended abruptly as the team scrambled to regain their composure. Grant pulled me aside. "You need to leave this house," he said. "Whatever is here is dangerous, and it's fixated on your daughter." But leaving wasn't so simple. The moment we tried to pack, the activity escalated. Objects flew off shelves, doors slammed shut on their own, and Lily began to speak in a voice that wasn't hers, a deep, rasping voice that sent chills down my spine. One night, as Claire and I sat huddled in the living room, the attic hatch creaked open on its own. A dark, humanoid figure descended the ladder, its glowing red eyes fixed on us. It moved with unnatural speed, its limbs jerking and twisting in impossible angles. We froze, paralyzed by fear, as it approached Lily's room. "No!" I shouted, finally finding my voice. I grabbed a kitchen knife and charged after it, but the figure vanished into the shadows. The next morning, we left the house with only the clothes on our backs. We never returned, and the house now stands abandoned, just like it was when we first found it. But even now, I can't escape the feeling that the demon followed us. Sometimes, I hear scratching in the walls of our new home. Sometimes, I wake to the sound of Lily whispering to someone in the dark. And sometimes, when I look at her, I see a flicker of red in her eyes.